Hello, my name's Derek and I'm a web developer, and I thought I might take a look at some ways of developing locally on your own laptop. And I primarily use Docker for my development, but there are a number of other ways of doing it, and there's no right or wrong way. This just happens to be the way I do it, and it's possibly not what you do. Well, maybe what you do, or you may be looking for something else, so hopefully you'll get something out of this. So the first approach is to build and install native packages on your computer. Particularly on a Mac, this is pretty easy. A lot of the packages are already installed. Windows, you can install and download, and you've also got Linux, distributions like Ubuntu, which already have loads of things already loaded on with them. Or if you're using Windows as well, there's also Windows subsystem for Linux as well. Now the advantage of running that particular setup is it's run natively on an operating system, so it uses fewer computer resources and is probably a lot easier on your hardware. Disadvantages, in some cases, can be tricky to set up. You need to spend time maintaining the software, and probably not so easy to change configurations if you're working, say, with Python, for example. Swapping between Python 2 and Python 3 could be an issue. There are, of course, loads of prepackaged systems out there: WAMP, MAMP, XAMPP, just to name a few. They're pretty good, and one of the big advantages of them is they're dead easy to set up and much easier to change configurations. You can generally sort of flick a few switches and change your version of PHP to whatever you're going to be uploading to. So they're great for that kind of thing. Disadvantages, sometimes they can conflict with existing software. Like, for example, you might have a web server running on your local machine, plus also when WAMP or MAMP sort of sets up their web server, so you have to mess around with ports, 8000 or 8080 or whatever. They can use more resources, although probably not necessarily a big problem for newer computers with more modern CPUs and a bit more memory. And there are limits to the configuration, and one of the other issues is that not all setups are the same, and I'll get to that. Another system is to set up a virtual box. We have a virtual operating system, and probably the easiest one to use in a Mac or Windows environment is Vagrant. Vagrantup.com is great. It solves a lot of those issues, particularly it only runs on my computer problem, which is often happens. You'll set up a system, runs perfectly, and the moment you upload it, all hell breaks loose. It's easy to identically configure machines, so once you've actually got all the config files and everything done, VirtualBox will build exactly the same machine over and over again. You can use very fine-grained configurations. Well, you're using a virtual operating system, so you've got all those things at your fingertips. Automated build scripts make maintenance relatively easy, and it can be deployed to other servers such as the cloud. And of course, the disadvantages are sometimes it can take a while for a server to build, and they can be a resource hog. If you've got a small laptop, you're probably not going to be able to run a big virtual machine on that. You'll be limited as to what you can run. Docker, well, the three previous approaches I mentioned were what they call monolithic, so everything's all contained under the one system. Now, Docker, is a little bit different to that. It takes the concept of virtual computers a little bit further, and splits that off into services. So you can package your services up as containers, and you'll hear that expression used quite a lot. Each container contains only the software needed to run a single application. And for example, you'll have a container for your MySQL database, a separate container maybe for your web server, a separate container for PHP, etc., etc., etc. Excuse me. Different containers can be put together to make a website. So a typical setup might be a database, a web server, PHP, and maybe a database utility such as PHPMyAdmin. The advantages: it's portable. You can run them on any computer with Docker, so it doesn't matter which operating system. And that, I think, is the big beauty of it, is you can have the configuration files all set up for Windows, Mac, Linux. It doesn't really matter what your operating system is. Containers can be pretty lightweight and can be also easily deployed to the cloud. Very easy to mix and match services, and scales up. You can spin up more containers when things get busy, of course. The disadvantages can be fiddly to maintain, and spinning up new containers on a cloud provider can be expensive if you just let it run automatically. I've heard horror stories of people clocking up tens of thousands of dollars accidentally when a container has just spawned multiple times. Just make sure you've got all that stuff tested before you go out there. What are the problems that containers solve? Well, works on my machine. So if you're working in a team, it's important everybody works on a machine with the same configurations. This means that the only variables left should be code and data. And if you know the specs of your production server, then you can make sure the development server matches it. Oh, I just spotted a typo. What if you want to try something else? Well, maybe you can change the web server from Apache to Nginx. You can swap out containers and test things out. Same thing also applies to databases. MySQL, MariaDB, you can swap them out. Your code base could be on PHP 7 and you want to see how it behaves on PHP 8. With Docker you can swap them out quite easily. The conclusion: I think Docker makes it quite easy for me to set up a development environment, and each project I don't have to worry about configuring MAMP, WAMP, ZAMP. Don't have to reinstall a different version of PHP or database for my project. It's all in the Docker Compose YAML file. Docker just makes it easy. It's as simple as that. Well, if you've enjoyed what you've seen and might want to see some more, you can hit that like button, subscribe, all those things that you're supposed to do on these YouTubes. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.